The silver band glinted under the chandelier light, stopping time itself. Alexander Reed, billionaire CEO of Reed Enterprises, stood paralyzed in his penthouse foyer, his eyes fixed on the simple ring adorning the finger of the young woman who had just finished dusting his bookshelves. In that moment, 20 years vanished like smoke, and he was once again a hungry, desperate boy making a promise he never thought he'd have to keep. If you're enjoying this story of fate, promises, and second chances, please hit that like button and subscribe to see more emotional journeys that remind us how our past shapes our future. Elena Martinez adjusted her uniform and tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear, unaware that the man who signed her paychecks was experiencing the shock of his life. She had been working at the Reed mansion for 3 months, yet this was the first time the elusive owner had actually noticed her. Something about his intense stare made her uncomfortable, like he was seeing a ghost. "That ring," Alexander finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Where did you get it?" Elena's hand instinctively covered the silver band, a protective gesture. "It was a gift, sir. A long time ago." Alexander's mind raced back to St. Catherine's orphanage, to the little girl with pigtails who had shared her sandwich with him on his first day, the only person who had shown him kindness when he had nothing. The memory was so vivid it ached. "Elena?" he asked, though he already knew. Those same warm brown eyes, though now they held caution instead of the innocent trust he remembered. Her brow furrowed. "How do you know my name?" "Because I gave you that ring," he said, watching recognition slowly dawn on her face. "I'm Alex. From St. Catherine's." The cleaning supplies Elena had been holding clattered to the floor. "Little Alex?" "But, you're Alexander Reed." "The Alexander Reed." "And you're the girl I promised to marry when we grew up," he replied, a strange mix of emotions washing over him, guilt, nostalgia, and something else he couldn't quite name. Elena's laugh was hollow. "We were children. You gave me a ring made from a twisted paperclip and said you'd come back for me." Her eyes hardened. "But you never did." The accusation hung in the air between them, heavier than it had any right to be after so many years. Alexander had built an empire from nothing, had overcome every obstacle in his path, yet he felt smaller now than he had as an orphan child. "I looked for you," he said quietly. "When I made my first million. St. Catherine's had closed. No one knew where you'd gone." Elena's expression remained guarded. "And now I'm cleaning your mansion. Funny how life works out." Alexander couldn't reconcile the bitter woman before him with the sweet girl who had been his only friend during the darkest time of his life. What had happened to her in the years between? What hardships had she faced while he was building his fortune? "Have dinner with me," he said suddenly. "Not as your employer. As Alex, the boy who made you a promise." Elena hesitated, 20 years of disappointment warring with curiosity. "Why?" "Because I want to know who Elena became," he answered honestly. "And because I never forgot you, even when I had every reason to forget everything about that place." That evening, in a private dining room of Alexander's favorite restaurant, Elena told her story. After St. Catherine's, she had bounced between foster homes until aging out of the system. She had worked multiple jobs to put herself through community college, earning an associate's degree in business administration. But a series of setbacks, a car accident, medical bills, a layoff, had left her struggling to make ends meet. "I kept the ring," she admitted, twisting the silver band that had long ago replaced the paperclip. "Not because I expected you to keep your promise, but because it reminded me that someone once thought I was worth coming back for." Alexander listened, shame burning in his chest. While he had been featured in Forbes and Fortune, Elena had been fighting just to survive. His success felt hollow suddenly, built on the back of a broken promise. "I convinced myself that you were fine," he confessed. "That you'd been adopted by a loving family, that you were happy somewhere. It was easier than admitting I had abandoned the only person who ever cared about me." As the evening progressed, glimpses of the Elena he remembered emerged, her quick wit, her resilience, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled despite herself. Alexander found himself drawn to her in a way that had nothing to do with childhood promises and everything to do with the remarkable woman she had become. "I don't need your charity, Alex," she said firmly when he suggested helping her financially. "And I don't need you to keep a promise made by a desperate child." "What about friendship?" he asked. "Could we start there?" Over the following weeks, Alexander and Elena rebuilt their connection. He learned that she volunteered at a literacy program for underprivileged children. She discovered his passion for designing sustainable housing for low-income communities, a project he had started in secret, away from the corporate spotlight. Elena resigned from the cleaning service, accepting Alexander's offer to work as a community outreach coordinator for his housing initiative instead. Her experience navigating the system gave her insights his team of Ivy League graduates lacked. Their friendship deepened, but Alexander was careful not to pressure her. The power imbalance between them was not lost on him, nor was the fact that Elena had every reason to distrust his intentions. 6 months after rediscovering each other, they sat on the rooftop garden of Alexander's building, the city lights spread before them like stars. "I've been thinking about promises," Elena said, breaking a comfortable silence. "Not just the ones we make to others, but the ones we make to ourselves." Alexander turned to her, curious. "What promise did you make to yourself?" "That I would never let my past define my future," she replied. "That I would build something meaningful with my life, regardless of where I started." She smiled at him, more open than he had seen her since their reunion. "I think I'm finally keeping that promise." "I made myself a promise too," Alexander admitted. "That I would never be helpless again. I thought money and power were the answer, but I was still empty." He took a breath. "Until I found you again." Elena studied him, her expression thoughtful. "We're not those children anymore, Alex. We can't go back." "I don't want to go back," he said. "I want to go forward. Together, if you'll have me." Their first kiss was tentative, a question rather than a declaration. But as Elena's arms wrapped around his neck, Alexander felt something settle in his soul, not the fulfillment of a childhood promise, but the beginning of something real and hard-won. 1 year later, Alexander stood before the board of Reed Enterprises, Elena by his side as he announced the expansion of their affordable housing initiative nationwide. The business press called it revolutionary. Social activists called it overdue. Alexander called it redemption. That night, as they walked along the river where they had spent countless evenings talking, Alexander stopped at a familiar bench. "Do you remember what you told me the day I left St. Catherine's?" he asked. Elena nodded, the memory bittersweet. "I said that no matter where you went, you'd always have a home with me." Alexander knelt before her, opening a small box to reveal not a diamond ring, but a simple silver band, an exact replica of the one she still wore. "I'm not asking you to fulfill a child's promise," he said, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. "I'm asking if you'll let me keep mine, not because I said I would when we were kids, but because loving you is the most honest thing I've ever done." Elena's eyes filled with tears, but her smile was radiant. "You know, for a billionaire, you're still that same boy who gave me his only possession in the world." "Is that a yes?" he asked, hope making his voice young again. Instead of answering, Elena pulled him to his feet and kissed him, the silver rings on their fingers catching the moonlight, one worn smooth by years of holding on to a memory, the other new but carrying the weight of a promise finally kept. Their wedding was small, held at the community center they had built together on the site of the old St. Catherine's orphanage. In attendance were children from similar backgrounds, staff from the outreach programs, and the few genuine friends Alexander had made during his rise to success. As they exchanged vows, Alexander looked into Elena's eyes and saw not the past they had survived, but the future they would build, a future where promises weren't just kept, but exceeded. "The ring I gave you as a child was all I had," he said in his vows. "The man I am today gives you everything I am and everything I will be." Elena squeezed his hands. And I promise to remind you every day that your worth has never been in what you own, but in who you are. 5 years later, Alexander and Elena Reed stood before the ribbon-cutting ceremony of the 20th Promise House, residential communities that provided not just affordable housing but comprehensive support services for families transitioning from homelessness and instability. Their 3-year-old daughter, Catherine, named for the place where her parents had first met, tugged impatiently at Alexander's pant leg. "Daddy, can I cut the ribbon?" Alexander lifted her into his arms, sharing a smile with Elena. "Of course you can, sweetheart. This is your legacy too." As Catherine giggled and posed for photos with the oversized scissors, a reporter approached Elena. "Mrs. Reed, what does it feel like to go from cleaning houses to running one of the most impactful charitable foundations in the country?" Elena watched her husband and daughter, her hand unconsciously touching the silver ring she still wore alongside her wedding band. "It feels like coming full circle," she answered. "Like finding home after a very long journey." That night, after Catherine was asleep, Alexander found Elena on their balcony, looking at the stars. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I was just thinking about that paperclip ring," she said, leaning back against him. "How something so small could shape our entire lives." Alexander kissed her temple. "It wasn't the ring. It was you. You were the first person who made me believe I deserved more than what life had given me." Elena turned in his arms. "And now look at us. Changing lives, raising our daughter, building something that matters." "The best kind of promise," Alexander agreed, "is the one that keeps growing." As they stood together under the vast night sky, Alexander Reed, once a forgotten orphan, now a man who had found purpose beyond wealth, understood that true fortune had nothing to do with the billions in his accounts and everything to do with the woman in his arms and the promise they renewed each day, to remember where they came from, to value what they had found in each other, and to use their second chance to create first chances for others. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more tales of redemption, love, and the promises that shape our lives. Remember that sometimes the most meaningful journeys are the ones that bring us full circle, back to the people and promises that made us who we are.